Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Hard 100, a video series documenting the culling of my collection from what it is to what it's going to be, and that is a Hard 100 games. I enjoy worker placement. I enjoy it a lot. I enjoy taking my little worker, putting them on a space, making them do a thing that gives me some stuff to be able to do other things, that gives me stuff to be able to do other things. Now, my favorite types of worker placement games are the ones that don't really try to reinvent the wheel. Every once in a while there comes a worker placement game that tries to add something to it, and it doesn't always succeed. Sometimes it does, sometimes you don't need that shit because your game stands on its own as a worker placement game. I talked about before how a worker placement game lives and dies based on how the individual spaces clickety-clack together and make the whole thing feel like an experience and not just pieces of a whole. Today, we're talking about a bit of a classic, a fine game, if you will, but not a fine game in the way that fine game, I say fine game, but in a fine game, the way you would say fine wine. Viticulture. Viticulture, the Essential Edition by James Stagmeyer, Alan Stone, and Moran Pedesera is a worker placement game in which you or a handful of players are working in old land Tuscany to make some wine and sell some wine and get some points. What we have here is the Viticulture Essentials Edition. This takes some of the expansions modules from the old Tuscany expansion and retools them for an essential experience. Now, I have never played this game prior to playing this game, and I have had this game in my collection for well over 2 years, and I've never once got it to the table. This was actually going to be one of my very first death matches along with brewmasters, brew crafters. It just never happened. So instead, I decided to play it on its own merits. So how was it? Pretty damn good. On your turn, what you're going to do is very, very easy. You're going to take one of your workers, you're going to put it on a space, and you're going to do that thing. Couldn't be easier. There are 4 seasons. Season 1, you take your big cock and you decide, do I want to wake up early or do I want to wake up late? The earlier you wake up, the earlier you get to go in the turn. The later you wake up, the more benefits you get, up to money and points and even a little extra temporary worker. You only start with 2 workers, so your workers are very, very important. So you have 2 workers and then a grande worker. So once you have put your little rooster on where it goes, the game begins. Now, you have your set of workers. So you have your spring, you have your summer, in which you are able to take the first set of worker placement spots. You have the fall, in which everyone gets to draw a card, and then you have the winter, where everyone gets to do the later worker placement spots. But you don't get all your workers back after summer. No, you have to plan ahead, like, oh, am I gonna do summer? Am I gonna do winter? What am I gonna do? What are the spots doing? Really, the whole thing you're trying to do is get points. The way you get points is by selling wine. How do you sell wine? You make wine with grapes. How do you get grapes? You grow grapes. So all of the things you're going to want to do, which is everything, is you're going to want to go to a space to plant grapes in your field, later harvest those grapes, turn those grapes into wine, and then sell that wine. Admittedly, when you first read the rules, it sounds a little complicated. They use a lot of jargon in the game to kind of tell what you're supposed to be doing, but it's actually super, super simple. At the top of your own player board, you have the fields where you put your grapes in. You can put up to a certain amount of grapes, no big deal. And then once you harvest the grapes, you keep the cards up there. They just turn into little grape tokens, and then you make those into wine, and at the end of every season, or every year rather, everything ages 1, and you've got to try to get the certain number up to a certain number, so you can sell those wines for a sweet, sweet lira and points. And then at the end of the year, you get residuals for all the wine that you sold. So it's kind of like a income that repeats. The worker placement spaces do any number of things. You can give a tour for a couple of bucks. You can draw a grape card, because at the top of the board, there are 4 decks. There is the deck for drawing the grapes. There is the deck for the summer visitors. There is a deck for the wine orders that everyone wants. And there is a deck for winter visitors. Your visitors are only little one-shot powers that let you manipulate things. And this is not something you want to take lightly when it comes to this game. This is where the game really, I think, really shines. You are going to want to do all of the spaces. And those spaces, especially in a 2-player game, are going to be taken up very quick. And unless you have your grande worker, which allows you to kind of do anything you want on the map, the visitors are a way to do those things without having to do those things on the spots. So the spots on the board are anything from drawing a card from one of the decks at the top to playing a card from one of the decks at the top, including building buildings on your player board or structures to allow you to do extra things and open up a little spot. In this version, you can actually sell a field, and in a 2-player game, I don't need all 3 fields. The only thing that lets me harvest more than 1 field are the visitor cards, and I didn't know that when I started playing, so I sold that field real quick, and since it's no penalty for points at the end of the game, it's fine to keep. Also, at the very, very beginning of the game, you are given 2 cards. You're given a mama card and a papa card, and this is going to determine your starting hand. It's a very fun thematic thing where you get your meeples, and then you get a combination of cards, plus your grande, and then the other side usually gives you an option between an extra boost of money or a structure. And the structure is usually at a discount, which is really nice. And the structures do everything from, oh, I have to have a trellis or irrigation in order to grow certain grapes. If I open up a wine tasting room, I get extra money or extra victory points whenever I give a tour. It's just fun little extra things that you get to do, which will kind of point you in a direction that you might want to go for the beginning of the game. So the game keeps going. It'll go year after year after year after year, drawing grape cards, to plant grape cards, to harvest grape cards, to turn them into wine, to age that wine, to sell that wine, to get points. Once someone hits 20 points, the end game starts, and then everyone plays out the round, and whoever has the most points is the winner. If you tie, you actually have to go buy a real bottle of wine and start drinking glass after glass in a drinking contest to see who the last person standing wins. And that's the way that works. It's in the rule book, you can check. Let's do some housekeeping before I get into the nitty and the gritty. Oh God. 1 to 6 players. Now I have only played this with 2 players. I would love to play it with 3 because in a 2-player game, there are 3 circles for each space, but we're only allowed to go to the first, so it's very, very tight. In a 3-player game, you can go to the center space, which gives you a bonus. That's when you can harvest multiple cards or play multiple cards or draw multiple cards, and that really gets things going a lot faster, and I would love to have played it that way. There is a solo variant that has an AI deck, and I haven't played that yet, but I damn sure will, and then I would never go up to 6 players, because why the hell would I? It is ages 13 and up. I don't know why. And then 45 to 90 minutes. 45 to 90. We played it in about 60 for a learning game. And yeah, fairly quick. Once you get the flow and everything, it's very, very fast. Now, like I said, we played 2-player, and it was a phenomenal 2-player experience. Once I was done playing this game, I immediately wanted to play it again. A couple of things that you might want to know. Your victory point marker is a cork. I didn't know that. I was like, okay, it's just a cylinder. But then later I heard, oh, it's a cork, and it goes up the thing. I was like, oh, that's thematic. Because everything in this game is super thematic. The layout of the board is beautiful. The player board is nice. It's got fun little things, and all of the cards and the visitors are very well thought out. Some of them are designed, it'll say here on the box, special edition. It comes with several enhancements from Tuscany, selected by Uwe Rosenberg. I don't know why he had anything to do with this, but that's fine. Art by Beth Sobel, and Stonemaier Games. It is the Essential Edition. The insert is nice. The components are lovely. It's a breeze to set up. I love the idea of moving your little rooster and the early bird gets the worm. There's also a spot on the board to hire additional workers. You put a worker there, you pay some money, and then whenever you retrieve your workers at the end of the year, you get an extra worker. Now in a 2-player game, this wasn't really a thing that I cared about. Phil, however, got all of his workers as soon as possible, but if he took any space, I didn't mind him going first, because if I went last, I was able to get that extra worker every time, and it wasn't really a problem until he was like, I don't want you having that worker anymore, I'm gonna go get it. In a 2-player game, getting those extra workers didn't feel as important, but with a 3-player game, I could have seen it being very, very, very important, because it's one thing to have one person go in front of me, whatever, I'll go second, but it's another thing to have everyone go in front of me, and I'm like, oh no, I need to go now. And in a 6-player game, if I'm going last, I don't even know what I'm gonna do with that worker. Which brings me to one of my main concerns is as the game went on, I didn't really have anything to do. If you don't save your workers, you can always, there's always a spot on the board to get $1, a lira, as it were. There's always a better spot to give a tour, but if you don't give the tour in the summer, you can't give it in the winter, so that's the only spot you can go. So all your workers are never wasted. There are just better things you can do with them. Having gone through the game once and gone through the cards a couple of times, now that I know that the visitors, how they work, I might have played the game completely differently. The summer visitors and the winter visitors, they're all unique. We didn't see a single repeat. So you can't really play your game hunting for a specific card, but you need to be aware of the types of cards that are in there. Viticulture, fantastic. I don't know what a viti is. Maybe wine in Spanish? No, Italian. But I know one thing for sure. Viticulture, I'm sorry it took me so long to play you. You are in my hard 100. The hype is real, guys. It is a great game. The box is beautiful. I am going to get the Tuscany expansion mainly for the additional board that it comes with, because the original Viticulture had a side of the board that had all the art and the text on it, and the other side was just the art with a minimal kind of style to it once you knew what you were doing. And this one only has the one side. So, I wish it had that extra fancy, beautiful art, but it doesn't matter, because once I get that other board and I hear it fits in this box quite nicely, I'm gonna get it. So ladies and gentlemen, Viticulture. If you like worker placement games, this is, I would say, a high-medium worker placement game. It's not a light worker placement game. It's not a medium, but it's not a heavy one either. It's simple to learn, but once you get into it, you understand how everything works, and then you really want to click your brain on to try to figure out the best way to get those points. And then you suddenly realize, I can't get all these points. What am I going to do? The game kind of slow, and then it takes off after a few years. The first few years aren't really very eventful, but then after that, it takes off. It went from we have no points to the game is over in like 4 turns, maybe less than that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this, the latest edition of the Hard 100. This is right for my shelf. If you are a fan of worker placement games and you want a little meat on that bone, go find yourself a copy of Viticulture Essential Edition. Can't speak to the expansion, but I can speak to this one. Ladies and gentlemen, it's good. Go get it, grab a glass of wine, and remember, if you tie, you get toe up from the flow up. Peace out.